click it. Going live. We're live.
Oh, all right.
So I am here with Dr. Joe. This is Dr. Joe's website. He wanted me to go do a live stream today, and I'm not sure why, but you didn't even tell me what you want to talk about, Dr. Joe.
I was invited by Darren to give a talk, and one of my favorite subjects really is economics. And people suffer horribly from lack of straightforward, true, accurate, and correct economic understanding.
Oh, that's true.
So you have two main schools of economics. One is the Austrian school that says gold and silver and tangible wealth is real money. And then you have the Keynesians who say, well, just keep printing money and keep spending it. As long as somebody accepts it, you're all set. Everything's wonderful. Now, I'll ask you a simple question. To which school do you think most of our politicians adhere?
Well, they like the Keynesian one, obviously, because they can print money like mad. They're thieves. Think about it. They're thieves. They want to steal your property.
No. They're statesmen. So this dichotomy here, these oppositional sides. As a doctor, I look at people who say, just print money and everything will be fine. And then I look at people who say, no, traditionally, historically, for thousands of years, gold and silver have been money. You know, the first recorded experience in the human tribe of funny money, we'll call it, paper money, was in ancient China. And the emperor wanted to buy some things and he didn't have enough money, so he made on paper, the emperor owes you this. And that got it out of control, as funny money always does. And in the end, it was a death penalty offense to refuse the emperor's medium of exchange, paper money. And guess what? People refused it anyway. So there is a long and honorable tradition in the funny money category. People have been printing money and saying, well, we extend credit to facilitate commerce, and we will stimulate the economy. And the bottom line really is, if you go to the grocery store, what do you get? You get a lot less than what you got last week. So it's difficult to slap people in the face any more than the prices at the gas pump, at the Kroger, at the Safeway, at whatever. But I still have people tell me, will walk right up and tell me that, Keynesian economics is the way to go. What we have to do is stimulate the economy. We have to print more money, and that'll cause an increase in employment, and everything will be wonderful. Just keep printing. Well, once you get to a certain point in the road to inflationary disaster, there's really no return. For example, when the Japanese started inflating their currency, it's called competitive currency depreciation. And for those countries that were on the gold standard, for example, Switzerland, what became the norm was the Swiss franc was so strong, it was so valuable, that people just couldn't buy from Switzerland. Their money didn't buy enough. The Swiss franc was too strong, so they went and bought from Japan or Korea or any one of those countries that engages in competitive monetary depreciation. The end result is, in the end, those countries who have inflated their currency end up with a huge disaster. But the disaster is not theirs alone. For the Swiss, unemployment became a problem because their money was worth too much. So any monkeying with the currency, they call it currency fraud.
Yeah, that's right. It's fake money.
It's fake money. And what inflation really is mass confusion. Nobody really knows what anything is really worth, and people are trying to figure it out. My background is not strong in Keynesian economics because I can see it's an obvious fraud. I was taught by Harry Brown, he ran for president here in the United States on the libertarian ticket. But it's actually quite straightforward. If you took your son to daycare center and his name was John Fern, and they give you a little piece of paper and it said John Fern, and you came back later on that day and you said, I want to get John Fern, and they say, well, that's John Fern. There's John Fern. What do you want from us?
It's a piece of paper. That's
it's
right.
a piece of paper. How schizophrenic can you be? It's a piece of paper.
Well, they're Satanists, right? That's necromancy, bringing dead things to life. I mean, that's satanic, you know.
The origins of this in modern day were the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds were bankers, and people would come and they would deposit gold and silver, and they would get a receipt. They would take that receipt, which was easy to put in your pocket, easy to carry around, light, convenient, and instead of going back to the bank, getting the gold and buying what they wanted, they would simply give the receipt to whoever they wanted to purchase something from. In the end, it was just so much more convenient to use paper money that people use paper money. And the Rothschilds found that they could put out about 5 times more paper money than they had gold and silver to back it before anybody caught on. Well, guess who was a big fan of paper money? The king. And kings all over the place need money because they're always at war with somebody. And so they found out that this form of banking, which eventually became known as fractional reserve banking, is just a very popular way to do things. Fractional reserve banking is very difficult for about 80% of the population to understand. If you walk into a bank with $1,000 and you say, I want to deposit this $1,000, the banker will take it and he'll give you a receipt for $1,000. Now, he has a reserve requirement. Before he can loan out any of that money, he has to put a certain amount aside. If the reserve requirement is 10%, how much does he have to put out of $1,000? How much does he have to set aside as a reserve?
Well, if it's a 3% reserve, then out of $1,000, he has to set aside $3.
Well, what they do is they take the entire $1,000 and they say, this is our reserve. And so then they can loan out at 10%, they can loan out $9,000.
Oh, I see. Okay, well,
right?
That's interesting.
And if you look on, there's a book called Modern Money Mechanics.
That's a scam, ain't it?
All men are created equal, aren't they? Except for bankers. They get to create something out of nothing. So the fractional reserve system in and of itself is a fraud, but nobody knows it because most of our money is in the form of checks and banknotes and things like that. So you bring in $1,000, you give it to the banker. Instead of putting 10% in reserve and having $900 to loan out, he puts the entire $1,000 in reserve and says, well, I've got $9,000 to loan out. Have you ever walked into a bank in the middle of the winter? You're from Connecticut, it's cold up there, right?
Yeah, yep.
When you go into the bank, is it cold?
No. Well, I got heaters.
No, it's never cold in the banks, and it's never cold in the government buildings. And people are, they're turning their thermostat down, and they're going to go through the winter. Every time an individual foregoes an expense, characteristically, it's because their money doesn't buy enough. All right. So the other day, the Federal Reserve came out and they said, well, we've got about 5% inflation and our goal was 3.5%. And that's not much, is it? 3.5%? That's not much. That today you buy a pair of shoes for $10. Next year they cost $10.35. Big deal. No big deal. All right, so here's a question for you. If it's 3.5%, what's the accumulated loss to inflation over a 10-year period? What's 10 times 3.5%?
35%. But it's more than that because it's compounded.
But it's more than that. But just straight out and out, it's 35%.
Well, it's more than that. It's more like about 50% because it's compounded.
Well,
it's 3.5% on 103.5%
right.
for the second year.
Right.
And then it's 3.5% on 200 yeah.
Yeah, anyways. It's more and more. So every 10 years, the value of everybody's money, you lose about a third. And I saw it when I was in practice. And when I got into practice in the late 70s, people would come in, they'd pay for their services, they'd go home, everything was fine. 10 years later, right? And my elderly parents, we would have a great Christmas. There'd be a turkey, there'd be a ham, there'd be all pies and all the rest of this Christmas tree. 10 years later, how much had they lost of their money? I saw people come in and they were counting their dollars to make sure that they could make it, and they were stretching their money. 10 years after that, people just simply could not afford what it was that they were used to being able to buy. And you see this all the time. If we didn't have consumer goods from China and Pakistan and India, we would have a very low standard of living. But because we can buy all this cheap stuff manufactured with slave labor overseas, we still have a pretty good standard of living.
That's about to end.
Oh, I agree. So you have a staggering loss over time of 3.5% per year. Every 10 years, you lose a third of the value of your money. Where does that go? Well, when you
It goes to the bankers.
When you drive down the street and you see a building 100 stories tall, that's not full of...
That's your money.
That's not full of...
That's the money they stole from you and everybody else.
That's not full of file cabinets full of mortgages. That's full of computers that are full of data that reflects mortgages. So here you are making do with your last year's shoes, and down at the bank, they're writing out, mortgages, and they're getting actual tangible assets. They're getting a legal claim on property, and they get it for the cost of printing a piece of paper. And all through America, 330 million people are making do with a little less and not going to the store and making do with something that costs less. The loss that we suffer because of inflation, because of monetary manipulation, is staggering. Now, let me ask you this. Glenn, suppose you were a farmer and you had an apple orchard. And on that apple orchard, you had 10 trees, and each tree yielded about 10 bushels. You had 10 trees, 10 bushels, 100 bushels, right?
Yeah.
So one day you were thinking, and you were deep in thought, and creative as you are, you figured, well, I got a cow, and every day I run some grass through that cow, and it produces fertilizer. Why don't I take some of that and spread it on each one of those 10 trees? And you go ahead and out of the sweat of your brow, you put that on the trees, and instead of 10 bushels per tree, you get 11. That's an increase of what? 10%. 10%. Yeah. So at the end of the year, you've got 11 bushels from each tree. You've got an extra 10 bushels. You've increased your productivity 10%. But sad to say, down at the bank are loaning out money to get assets, real property, homes, businesses, land, and they print a little more money than last year. So prices of all of your supplies go up 10%. Sorry, Glenn. Would have been nice for you to have an extra absorbed it. Now, just out of curiosity, how higher degree of productivity and where did that money go? If debt and productivity are equal, then the prices will stay the same. If debt increases and productivity increases, but not as much, you'll see prices increase at the grocery store. And the end result of this is the bankers, through currency manipulation, have manipulated and siphoned off all or almost all of the increases in productivity of all of the people in the economy, plus an additional 3% per year, which is a third of your money every 10 years. The loss that we have had is staggering. My calculations say that we've lost about 80 to 90% of everything that we've worked for, and they've done it in such a way that almost no one understands, and most people don't even notice. And that's Keynesian economics. Now, just out of curiosity, was there money for wars?
Well, they print that up too.
Sure they did. So your congressman or your senator goes down and he says, well, what's going to happen next? Just on it, well, I think we're going to have a war. So he buys stock in Raytheon and General Electric and all of these companies, and he sits back and it comes up for a vote. Should we have a war in Greater Nowhereistan, where America has no interest of any kind whatsoever? And the answer is, sure, I'll vote for that. And what happens to the value of his stock over time? So what you see is the staggering swindle-a-thon that our government turned into in 200 years. It went from an honest government with sound money to a monster that is plundering the world. And almost no one understands it. And it's shocking, to see the kind of lies. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to protect against it. George Washington himself signed the Coinage Act of 1792, which prescribed the death penalty to anybody who messed with the gold backing of the currency.
Well, they don't mess with that.
Well, what do they do?
It's available. I can show you. I've got a silver eagle in my pocket.
Sure,
right now.
Absolutely. Well, they find a way around it.
It's all in that. That's right. It's the matrix. The matrix is real. And then on top of that, because our parents were brain dead idiots, they went down and volunteered with the birth certificate so they could create that minor estate. And so that minor estate is sitting there with millions of dollars in it. And then when you get kicked off, the government gets to take all the fake money out of there. So that's why they go and have a battle that kills 300,000 people, because then they get $3 trillion worth of federal debt paid off or more.
Here's a question for you. Are you a resident of the state of Texas?
Resident is commercial.
Resident is Latin. Well, they swindle you right in front of your face.
That's right.
They really do. And they're very kind to them. It means res ident. Res is a thing in Latin. Ident is, and the cop who pulls you over and says, are you a resident? Is this your residence? Are you a resident? Are you a thing identified?
Right.
And, people will say to me, well, I went to court and they gave me a jury trial, so I feel like I got justice. But they found against me, which is what? 99% of the time.
It's a kangaroo court.
Well, he got a jury trial. What more do you want?
Well, a jury trial is kind of like jury rigging something. It's an emergency thing.
Yes.
We did a trial by jury.
A trial by jury.
That's right.
Oh,
but people are too stupid to figure that part out.
They are and they're not. Every time you turn around, they're swindling you somehow.
I tell you, if there's any place you can get your rights violated, it's in their so-called courts.
Oh, my God. And it's on and on and on. The money's worthless. You work till you drop. You have the right to life, liberty, and property.
Right.
But realistically speaking, and if we didn't have the Constitution, we would have nothing
I'll tell
at
you,
all.
the Constitution's the only thing we
We
got.
would have nothing at all. So
it's brilliant.
Well, it didn't stop them.
Well, it's because we don't assert it. We don't demand it. We're asleep at the wheel. We don't know what it provides.
Well, people ask
Don't get me going. You're going to get me going now.
We'll give you a jury trial. Don't worry. So
a jury trial is like jury rigged. It's an emergency sort of thing that you put together. It's not the real thing.
Nobody knows that a trial by jury, where the jury sits and does everything.
The jury conducts the trial.
They conduct the trial. So they go, I'll give you a jury trial. And then you ask the judge, and the judge will say, well, we don't do that here. Well, yeah, you do.
Well, no, actually, under the supreme law of the land, all judges are required to have an oath to it, and notwithstanding any state law or constitution. And so I don't care what your codes say. Either give me a trial by jury or dismiss this matter.
Or dismiss the case. Well, when I was convicted of something that not only I didn't do, I was convicted of something that never happened by a court that never had jurisdiction. So I was accused of something. I filed 14 motions to dismiss for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. Later on, when I appealed it, the Supreme Court of Criminal Appeals said the trial court never acquired jurisdiction. So they tried me for something, and then the Supreme Court said this guy never did anything, meaning me.
Well, but
So,
that's because you were brilliant by filing those challenges to jurisdiction. That's the brilliant thing that you did that was so fatal to them, because they didn't even try to prove jurisdiction.
they didn't even try. But you know, here when somebody takes an oath of office, like this thing with the examining trials, when they say, I swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and then they say, well, you don't get a trial by jury unless you demand it. No, that's not the way it goes. You swore an oath, and you're supposed to provide what you swore to provide, whether or not I demand it or not. But
Really, yeah, you got that right.
Absolutely.
But they're a bunch of thieves and pirates, and they sit there and play stupid. And then when you try and sue them, you got to sue them in their so-called courts, because the brain-dead idiots, the sheeple out here, are too stupid to convene our own common law juries.
Well, there's an interesting.
Don't get me going. You're going to get me going again.
That's an interesting comment. Humans are tribal creatures. Whether you believe in evolution or not, we depended on one another for various things, and eventually it became commerce and whatever. So here's my comment. We have a right of some sort to expect the person next to us has more brains than a trout. Whether or not that is actually the case is, but the way human societies developed, people relied on each other. And when somebody is so stupid that they don't understand the absolute rudiments of fraud, and swindling,
and the schools are teaching people that 1 and 1 is 3.
Well, and they don't know that whether they're a cat or a dog or whatever.
Yeah, no joke.
But so my comment is, we have a situation where people are so stupid they're dangerous.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man.
I mean, they are dangerous. I have watched juries. I had a jury trial. The jury was told that I had firearms, which I had an absolute legal right to have. And the jury said, the prosecutor said, do you think that DeRusso should be allowed to have firearms? And the jury said, well, yes, but only a few, and then only the ones that the government approves of.
Yeah, right.
The very purpose of the Second Amendment
is to keep... A bunch of brain-dead idiots.
Yeah, so we are at a point now where people don't know whether they're gay. Somewhere in the middle, they dye their hair one side purple, the other side green, put a bone through their nose, and go and demonstrate. We're at a point now where people, many of them, are so stupid, ill-informed, misinformed, that they're actually dangerous. So you have to take very good care of yourself and your affairs and the people in your life that are meaningful to you. But don't expect a whole heck of a lot of other people.
Well, I think that at a recent meeting on Saturday, I don't know if you all remember who all of you was at that meeting on Saturday, but there was a guy that's a retired Marine Corps colonel, and he said that you need to get a place to go out in the country because the cities are not going to be a good place to be pretty soon. And I think he's right. And so that's what I would be doing.
People ask me what my expectation is, and I am far more pessimistic than almost anybody. I believe that we're going to have a collapse of this worthless currency system. I believe it's already in progress. People are trying to compensate for it, but it's too much. The fraud and the lack of solvency in our financial system is going to bring the society down. And I believe that you'll see 100 to 150 million people die of starvation, violence, and disease in the next 10 to 15 years. And I don't think there's any way to stop it. The debt that will destroy America has already been incurred. The debt that will destroy this country has already been signed for, and
that's
it's already
why they want to kill off a bunch of people so they can pay off the debt with all these dead bodies. Yes, Francine?
Okay, I want to ask Dr. a question. Now, we have just watched a couple of videos
Right.
that Glenn showed us
Right.
explaining that a lot of what the white hats are doing, I don't need that mic there.
Okay.
A lot of what the white hats and black hats are doing will be diversions. They're not going to tell us what they're doing. They're going to make us look over here while they're doing something over
Right.
here.
There's deception. There is.
Deception on both sides.
Right.
Because in the end, not only have we already won, but it's right now
Right.
Being that we just saw that, and we've heard this now for a few years.
Right.
Your outlook for the future for the next 10 to 15 years. Can you clarify your position, because that's pretty doom and gloom.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Even if they changed the government to honest government today, right now, this minute, there are still $50 trillion worth of worthless Federal Reserve notes floating around. And if you're a business person, you understand that debt either has to be serviced or liquidated. What is a depression, Francine?
Okay, well,
A depression is a period of liquidation after an inflationary binge. We've been
Wow.
on an inflationary binge for over 100 years, and there are millions of businesses that have to be liquidated because they are not what the market wanted in any way, shape, form, or manner.
I'm not challenging you on your outlook. What I am challenging is there is an opposing view here, and you two are sitting next to each other. With everything that we have been shown, leads us to believe not only have we won, but we need to hang in there until this is over with. Things are going to get better, and we will be a part and instrumental of manifesting that. The banking will get better. The meds will get better. Our pharmacy drugs, they will go away. Well, things are going to get better.
What about the debt?
Hold on, don't.
What about the debt? Is it going to go away?
Yes. In fact, you're going to see where our debt of $21 trillion was paid back in 2017. What I'm trying to get at is Glenn's view, or the videos he's showing, and from what I've read,
Right.
shows that our future is going to get better. But we're at that precipice of transition that leads to chaos. What you're saying is there is no future, that's only going to get worse. So there's an opposing view that we're seeing here today.
Well, other people have the
Francine,
right.
let me say that if you listen to 107, it's going to get worse. Okay, it's going to get a lot worse, but ultimately it'll start getting
Yes.
better.
And
But
that's what
it's going to be really ugly this year for sure. Anyways, what were you going to say, Joe?
that's not 10 to 15 years out.
No, that's true.
Well, I was reading something yesterday. There's a new breed of COVID coming around,
You got disease X.
and it's 40% mortality amongst those people who have already been vaxxed.
Isn't that ironic?
That is not good news.
Well, what I thought,
So that could be considered under the emergency, all right?
Yeah.
UN troops could come in, the United States could be overwhelmed, with people dying, whatever. So this
Right.
could be the possible.
Well, I think it's going to be more like false flag attacks, and that'll give the UN to come in to declare peace. I mean, that's what Biden's setting up already, because he's going out and saying that the enemy is these MAGA people, and so then they have some false flag attacks, and they say we're in a civil war and we need these UN troops to come in and keep the peace, and so that's more the scenario that I see, quite frankly, but I don't think it's going to work out too well for those UN troops, because America is the most heavily armed nation on the planet. And anyways, go ahead, Joe.
If
all these viruses out there, the laboratory in Japan has been analyzing all those viruses, and they are all man-made.
Yeah.
It's not a natural progression.
That's right.
So people who have taken the vaccine are immune compromised.
Yeah,
And they're susceptible to get this and die.
yeah,
there,
but there's counteracts. There's things you can take to get rid of that stuff out of your system and build your immune system. But go ahead, Joe.
do you have another toothpick, or is that your last one?
Well, I got other ones. Why?
I could borrow one. We could sit here side by side and chew toothpicks and talk about. Francine, I tend to be a pessimist on a good day with a strong tailwind.
okay.
All right, so I could be wrong, but there's a humongous debt. And when I talk to people, one of the things that has not been accounted for was when I was young, and I talked to my sister about this. My mother used to make soup, and she used to cook at home, and we had real food, and there was a garden, and the people across the street grew beans. I had a person working in my office, and we went to the store, and I said, "Go and get some eggs." And she said, and she said, "All right, I know where they are." I said, "Where are they?" She said, "Well, they're in the dairy department." I said, "Why are the eggs in the dairy department?" She said, "Well, I don't know. Do cows lay eggs?" And the point is, you have what our education has done. Medicine has made people sicker. Processed food has given the number of people with cancer, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease. It's approaching 100%. People go to college and come out stupider than when they went in. I mean, it's a disaster in terms of economics, without question, but it is a disaster in many other ways also. So I tend to be very pessimistic, but I think I do so for very good reason. I talk to people from time to time, and boy, it's really depressing.
Someone else had a question back here.
Yeah, since Dave and Brett didn't make it today, do you know about the debt being canceled out in 2017? Do you know about that?
No.
I've heard rumors about that. I'm not sure. I mean, that's a rumor in my opinion. I have seen no evidence of it. Nothing confirming it.
Had I had advance notice, I could send you, Glenn, a PDF. I've not held it in my hand, but there's documentation that is available on the internet.
Do you?
Wait a minute before you interrupt. There is documentation available on the internet in PDF forms that will show the trail and the process, how it was paid off. Now, go ahead, Dr. Jones.
I'm just saying, any debt resolution like that would cause such problems in the bond market. I mean, people say, well, it would just erase the debt. What about all the people whose retirement funds are invested in something where there's a debt involved? Or what are you just going to say to them? Well, you had a retirement yesterday, but we erased the debt, so now you're SOL, you're out of luck, you don't have a retirement anymore? You got to be kidding me.
That over the last 50 years,
Who did?
companies, they made a covenant with their employees to pay a retirement, and then all of a sudden they brought somebody in that reorganized the company, and suddenly the retirement plan just evaporated.
And what happened to those people? They didn't have a retirement. What's the name of the big guy in Texas who took over golf or something like that? T. Boone Pickens.
Oh, he's passed away now.
Good. You know what he did? He looted the retirement fund of a major, oil company. All of those people lost their retirement, and people were saying, "Oh, Boone Pickens would walk in the room, and people would say, 'Hi, Boone Pickens.'" He took their retirement fund. You can't just say, "Okay, well, the debt's no more in place." What's going to happen to all the people who depend on that money for retirement? You can't just waive a debt like you're waving a magic wand.
It's all fictitious.
Of course it's fictitious. That's the problem.
Oh, they can't put it on the internet.
Say again?
It's not true.
It's not just about retirement funds, and you know that. There's a lot more to it. This didn't happen overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. There are plans in place right now, but you don't want to see it or research it, which is fine. You think that we're going to have a horrible...
Francine, how many people died prematurely of diseases related to malnutrition in the last depression from
I think it's okay that you have your perspective. I'm just trying to understand why you have that perspective. Because when something in your life happens good that you were expecting to go wrong or negative, and it turns out it works out, what's your reaction? Because you admit you're pretty skeptical.
Well, it's like I'm on Mars and you're on Venus. We're just come from entirely different places.
I'm trying to understand, have you not seen or read anything about things that are potentially coming in the future?
Francine, my mother lived through the Great Depression, and she used to tell me about it.
Things are going to get tough, but they are also going to get better. But 10 to 15 years out,
Right.
really, really believe that things are going to become so decimated that,
I think you will live upon the ruins of a once great civilization.
well, I certainly hope you're wrong.
Well, I hope I'm wrong too. I probably hope I'm wrong more than you hope I'm wrong. But the things that I see and the size of the malinvestments, it's staggering, just staggering. And at the same time, we have things like artificial intelligence that increase productivity. So if it's possible to get some of this corrected, I would be delighted. But the end result is I don't see any hope because of the staggering size of the worldwide debt.
It is overwhelming, but we're talking, it's overwhelming, but I'm not going to believe, and most people I know of are not going to accept that this is going to end really badly.
People,
Definitely 10 to 15 years out. A lot
people,
of people I know of that are researching and are reading, doing their homework, doing their due diligence, see that what we're going through right now may indeed, as Liz said, get a little worse. But in the end, and this has been planned for a long time, it is going to get better. So I hope you are proved wrong.
all right. If I am wrong and things get better, then what will things be like?
Well, they're going to be radically different than they are now, for sure.
Okay, but if things get better, what will they be like?
What do you want?
That's
I think we're going into the age of the Jetsons, where we're going to have anti-gravity and free energy, and we'll be mostly. I think Cliff High basically nails it, and we'll be basically, into our own intellectual philosophies because we won't need money. I mean, to buy anything per se. I mean, they'll have food replicators. We'll have all that stuff eventually. Now, and we'll go out and we'll populate, the galaxy, and like Star Trek. I think that's essentially where we're headed. I mean, even 107 even talked about that. He said that we're gonna our solar system is a junkyard from other civilizations that were here, and we're gonna replace them. And so, but that's not going to happen, tomorrow or next week or even maybe in 10 years. Maybe might be, some of it could be centuries away, but that's what our destiny is.
Well, if you look at the numbers, what's going on with autistic children? Does anybody know? What? We have more autistic
Well, that's
kids.
because of the jab, the forced medical experiments, all these Satanists with all that crap.
For whatever reason. Yeah, absolutely. All right. What's going on with obesity? Are we having more obesity or less?
I don't wanna talk about it.
Right. I don't blame you. All right. Is there more mental illness? Is there less? Exactly. Is there more cardiovascular disease, or is there less? There's more, and I would like to be hopeful. But 50 years ago, when I was taking acupuncture from a Chinese doctor, and he said, "You folks are eating way too much processed food. What you're doing is the largest experiment in devitalized food in the history of the world, and you will pay a fearsome price." And here we are 50 years later.
I think he's 100% right. I'll tell you,
and
man.
I look at it and I go, my God, the population is so sick. I was at Walmart the other day, and a 17-year-old girl, she looked like she was 17. She was so heavy, she came in, jumped into an electric cart, and went around in Walmart. When you have 17-year-old people who are so morbidly obese that they don't want to walk and don't want to do anything,
I'll tell you.
when I was 17, I was running 5 miles a day and lifting weights. And so anyways, am I pessimistic? I'm very pessimistic. I'm pessimistic about people's health. I'm pessimistic about their sanity. I'm pessimistic about the finances. But overall, the sun is always going to come up in the morning. Some people will do just fine. That's why the name of my website is The Optimal Human Experience. So I think that the optimal human experience is if let's you and I go over to Brahms, and we will get hot fudge sundaes with extra peanuts. That is
There goes the obesity.
there is the optimal human experience.
Black coffee. Let's just have a cup of black coffee.
All right. Well, anyways,
I think Brent has a question over here.
yes.
What's that?
Did you have a question?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's kind of related to it. Have you read the PDF of The Great Awakening?
The Great Takening?
Uh-huh.
Never heard of
that.
Never heard of that.
Okay. It's a document by David Rogers Webb, and he indicated you heard about like rehypothecation of securities.
Right, right.
And he was I guess a hedge fund manager at one
Right.
time during over his lifetime. Anyway, he was saying that a lot of these, like if we have securities and things like that, that we actually don't have ownership of those. That these securities are lent out, and that if, let's say that they're lent out with a let's say derivative or something of that nature as collateral, and the person cannot come up with the funds, goes into like bankruptcy, that they're entitled to that collateral, and it may not be even you that has kind of possession. It's kind of like similar to like.
It sounds like a swindle to me. Whenever the
there's fraud, but
whenever
he was saying that according to the law that they're
Right.
able to pick that up.
good luck on that one. Whenever the system wants to swindle
Okay.
you, they use certain words, and they say, well, we deal in securities.
Yeah, right.
There couldn't be any more preposterous lie. They're backed by absolutely nothing. It's just a piece of paper. Have you ever been to a law firm, Glenn?
A law firm?
A law firm. You go to a law firm. They say, well, the
What's
firm.
a law
Nothing
firm?
could be any more preposterously misleading than a law firm that deals in securities, right?
Yeah, but
It's all lies.
I guess today we don't have paper certificates of our securities that we own, of let's say of a company.
Right,
All we have is just an account.
right.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know how far-fetched that his ideas are, considering that as I have a bank account, but if my understanding
Yeah,
is,
but when you put money in the bank, you give that money to the bank, and now
yeah, right, we're a creditor,
yeah.
right? So it's not really my money. If the bank decides that it wants that money, it's their money.
What you're doing is depositing securities into that account, because Federal Reserve notes are securities.
Here.
Well, I mean, regardless. I mean, you've heard of bail-ins, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes
it may
you
be
become
the
a
same
creditor.
kind of concept in these the way securities are handled.
Well, the Securities and Exchange Commission oversees all of this, and with the preponderance of the evidence is that the government is really on top of things, and the economy is expanding, and the Federal Reserve Board has approved an additional $20 trillion and it's just all baloney. It's funny money.
Okay, so
It's worthless
so
currency.
Should you be concerned about having securities in an account for, like, let's say like
The way it'll work out is they have to keep expanding the money supply to keep ahead of people.
No,
in
I'm not
other
talking
words-
about money. I'm just talking about security.
Well, money is a form of securities.
No, I'm talking about a share in a company.
Okay.
Not money in itself.
All right. The way it'll show up is you'll pick up the newspaper in the morning one day, and it'll say the securities are no longer being traded, or there's been a bank holiday, or everything has been depreciated. And the bottom line is what you saved all your life for, you won't have anymore. That's how it will show up. Whether it shows up in increased prices or securities that are confiscated, the whole thing is you're looking at an economic disaster of unprecedented proportions.
Okay, so, so you're in agreement that the securities that you have in a, let's say, an account, there's a risk in losing.
I would say that
And like
they
even
very much
ownership
is a
of
risk.
those securities.
Yeah, I think there's
nothing
a
secure
risk.
about that.
There's
because,
nothing.
You know, it's all based on a value, and what if that value goes down? You know, okay,
What-
you got
Yeah, but
security and less than you had before.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about the actual value. I'm just saying I don't even have them anymore.
Right.
Okay.
You never did. They were a fiction. You know, the amazing thing is that the legal system can create legal fictions. For example, when they spell your name in all capital letters, my understanding is that per Roman law, that is capitis diminutius maximus, the greatest diminution of your state as a citizen or as a human being. What they do is they spell your name in all caps, and that converts you into legal fiction. And you know, my esteemed colleague here still has some kind of faith, confidence, and belief that you can keep these criminals from stealing everything but your underwear. And I think that time and experience has shown that a good government intent on doing so can swindle an enormous number of people out of just about everything. And that's where we are today, folks.
It seems to me almost any system of exchange that you create is going down a bad path. The only thing that really has value is, you know, people think houses appreciate value. No, they don't. A house is worth a house. 3 chickens is worth 3 chickens. The amount of money that it takes to buy it is what changes. The money becomes more worthless, so it is a higher price. So anything, whether it's securities, commodity, whatever it is that you have, it's not hard goods, it's fiction.
Yeah.
Anything that you own, if it's land,
Yeah.
a pair of boots, a barn full of hay, whatever it is, that
Yeah.
has true value. Anytime you offer an exchange that can be manipulated, you're opening yourself up to being swindled. And human beings are pretty good at greed, dishonesty, and manipulation.
It's shocking.
I remember hearing an ad some number of years ago. I worked for dealerships for many years, and they have lots of games. And they were offering, you know, rebates. You know, they'll offer you a TV valued at $299. It's only a $25 TV, but valued at $299.
Right.
So rather than getting $299 off the cost of the car, they just give you a $25 TV.
Right.
It's all manipulation. And in the evaluation of the ad came out and it said, you know, new car dealers will resort to inflated value, free gift, whether it's a haircut, free movies for a year, or whatever it is. But the one thing that they will never resort to, they'll never lower themselves far enough to get to, is just heads up, good business. They're always going to manipulate. And as long as people go for it, it fuels the whole system. So, I'm just saying that with the human element, anything that you use as an exchange, you're already on a bad path. How far it goes or how fast is dependent on how.
Historically, gold and silver have kept their value, and even they are not doing all that good.
Yeah,
The
but I mean,
bankers
like
can
this right now,
manipulate that.
Let's just say that all the fictitious Federal Reserve notes and all the rest of the stuff, just people said, well, I'm not going to take that. That has no value. I'll take chickens, or I'll take whatever.
It's so inefficient, you can't do it.
If you did that, the value of gold would go away too, because who's going to eat gold? Gold won't clean your food, it won't clean your hair, it won't fill your well, it won't fill your stomach. I'm just saying that if you get down to things that are truly valuable for survival, gold is still a a form of exchange.
Well, you're talking about an extreme in which there's no civilization, and
Right.
if you're
So
lucky,
anytime
you have a
got the
chicken.
human element,
Yeah.
you're going to be somewhere on that path of manipulation. And that's where the problem arises, from the human element. So it's a nice theory that we can come up with some sort of new, professionally manipulated system to overpower the other ones, but it's still a manipulated system.
It's still a system.
Right. If it's outside the realm of solid, valuable things to survival,
I want to make a comment to Francine. I had a friend, Dr. Ross Stewart, and he was telling me about how he's training his kids to work hard. And I said to him, good idea, work hard. What is it they're going to work at? Do we need more televisions? He had like 3 or 4 or 5 televisions in his house. Well, no. Well, do we need more shoes? Everybody, well, there's no, we got enough shoes. Well, do we need more food? No. We throw away about 50% of the food that we buy. Maybe we need more automobiles. No, we don't need more automobiles. All right, so what is it that we need more of that would make our lives so marvelously better?
How about love?
That's very good.
All right. Well, how about just an absence of nastiness to start with,
Well, it's not
on the road to more love. Okay. But, we have a situation. I have a friend who asked me, when's the last time have you been through difficult times? I said, yeah, sure, everybody has. He said, when's the last time you missed a meal? I said, well, what do you mean missed a meal? He said, well, you didn't have enough money to buy something to eat, or you didn't have food. I said, well, I've never missed a meal. He said, well, you mean to tell me you had hard times and you never missed a meal? You never had it so difficult that you never even missed a meal?
Well, I think it makes a difference whether you purposely miss a meal or someone.
I deliberately.
Someone is restraining you from missing.
I miss meals because if I don't, I'd get too heavy. But here in America, we have it. We have it unnaturally good in many ways. So, people say to me, things are going to get better. How are they going to get better? What is it that they don't have that having more of would make things, that such an improvement?
That's like asking a millionaire or some super wealthy person.
Yeah.
You're still in the pursuit of wealth.
Yeah.
What is just enough?
Just a little bit more than what I got right now. They do it as a hobby. That's what they want to do, and they like it. By the way, do wealthy people add to a civilization, or do they detract from a civilization?
Are they
It depends
Democrat
on
or
how they
Republican?
use the money.
Pardon?
Are they conservative or liberal?
Okay, that's a good question. All right. Well, that's
A good conservative man is making business for people to come work at
yeah.
and in pursuit of their happiness.
Okay.
The other side, not so much.
Yeah, money is a powerful tool for good or evil, depends on how it's used.
Look at Carnegie, he was a philanthropist.
A philanthropist? Okay.
Benefited a lot of people.
All right.
Well,
Well, I know he made a lot of libraries, but in the end, it's like, well, what is the good? Is it good that we have so much leisure time to watch TV and we're all of us, including myself, heavier than we should be, and what's the good, Francine? I don't know. You waved your arm.
I was going to ask, given your outlook and your perspective, and of course I respect it, what would you like to see in the future that would help turn your mind around?
It's hard for me to say what would be best for other people. I would like to see more intellectual activity. I would like to see people reading more and studying more and learning more. That I would like to see. Good place to start. I do not consider myself well educated at all. I've got more hours in college than most people could ever think of. I've got postdoctoral studies in diagnosis and internal diseases, in neurology, in orthopedics, in psychology. I've written 2 books. I do not consider myself particularly well educated.
Well, what else besides reading
get out there and get a job.
What kind of job would you?
You know, start with manual labor so that you learn
What
cause
kind
and
of job
effect.
would you want that you would enjoy?
Well, what I want right at the moment, I would
No,
like
not
to,
at the moment, in the future.
oh, in the future,
Yeah.
make me president of the Federal Reserve Bank,
Okay.
right? I would slowly replace, you know, gold and silver back into the economy, and I would lower taxes, and I would have a constitutional amendment that anybody who worked for the government or purported to represent the government in any way, who misled, falsified, or told a lie, would have a very severe punishment. At least accountability, right? But I think that the amount of falsehood and out lying, I mean, it used to be, you know, when I was raised, it was like you don't tell a lie, you just don't. And now I see people do it on a professional basis. I mean, they don't do anything else. That is the end of our civilization as we knew it. Russia, 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 and they end up there's no Russia at all. I mean, unbelievable. And there's no accountability. You got to be kidding me. So if we want a civilization, we have to have honesty, integrity. I mean, I don't expect people to be perfect, but if $50 trillion in debt, worthless money, you know, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. The next generation of people, Americans, are very resentful of the economic situation we're in. A lot of them will not be able to afford houses. They're not happy. So once a government gets off of a strict hard money standard, very shortly after that, it's too tempting to just print money and have wars and et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it's years before the economic damage that artificial money caused ultimately.
Well, this all started. This
expect this from people who pretend to be government who aren't.
Well, you know,
Lie professionally.
they lie professionally.
Yeah.
They are not a government. They haven't been a government for over 100 years, and you expect them to suddenly be honest?
No, I think there's no way to make an honest government.
Really, we the people need to get it sorted out. I mean, that's why they had militias. You know, in colonial days, and I did a video about this, in colonial days, everybody was required to be armed. If you went to a public meeting without your arms, you got a fine. And so that's a far cry from what it is today. And if all the people were armed, our government would have a very different tune, I guarantee you. And it's only because we're not armed.
In the end, there's an old Chinese saying that everything eventually turns into its opposite. Was America a very honest government in the early days?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it really was. And now it's completely its opposite.
Yeah, that's a bunch of thieves.
Yeah, so there's no way to stop it. There are people who there was a book written called The Fourth Turning, and they say approximately every 250 years there will be a convulsion, a societal disaster. There'll be a war or a runaway inflation, and then the next generation starts to build up, and they suffer privation terribly, but they get things going, and then the next group works hard and really builds up, and then by the time you get to the third, you know, your kids are taking fentanyl and dyeing their hair purple, and then you get to the fourth turning, and everything falls apart, and there's no way to stop it. And we are apparently it looks like
The fourth turning.
we're at the fourth turning. Yeah.
And who wrote that?
If you look up the fourth turning, you'll get there. There were two historians. I can't remember their names right off the bat.
Are they superior to Almighty God?
No, they're just historians.
Nothing new under the sun. What's been done
Nothing new.
before will be done again.
Nothing new under the sun. Nothing. And you know, the Constitution and Bill of Rights, etc., were regarded as, man, this is going to make a big difference. In the end, it did, and in the end, you'll find that it really didn't.
Well, but the only reason it didn't is because we, the people, it goes back to the educational system. I mean, when 1 and 1 is 3, how can people have the brain cells to figure out what a trial by jury is, and all the rest of it? It's because of the the lack, and you know who the first publisher of the Bible was in this country? It was the Continental Congress, because they wanted people to learn how to read, and so
Well,
we got to get back to that.
Here's a statistic for you. Around 1900, less than 2% of the population was regarded as homosexual, right? 20 years later, it was 5%. 20 years after that, it was 10%. I mean, it's like 10% now. And if everything goes the way it's supposed to go and the way it has been going, we'll all be gay by the year 2050.
And
They throwing numbers out there. They were saying 10%, but it was really less than 1%.
Oh, it's never been very many. But if you watch the news, you'd think that every other person was in some kind of identity crisis, right?
Well, that may be true now. A lot of people are in identity crisis.
Yeah.
You know, they think they're cats or dogs or.
Lucy, what do people in the Orient think of Americans who don't know whether they're a cat or a dog or a cow? All right. Well, I have said as much as I have to say. Thank you for
Okay.
your time and attention.
Well, Dr. Joe's website is called Optimal Human Experience, and this is all part of it. Part of the Optimal Human Experience is being alive and healthy, and so that's financial health too as well, and so that's what he's concerned about. And so I would encourage everybody to check out his website and his podcasts. And I guess that's about it. We've been going on now for over an hour, so that's pretty good. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I'm gonna end the stream now, and what we'll do is we'll get back next time. Thanks for watching.
Live long and prosper.
There you go.
You forgot to do that.
Right.